welcome to the second episode of Un-Parlimentary with Lisa Gretzky. I am Lisa Gretzky, the NDP MPP for Windsor West. Today's topics are I'm going to cover the Fair Hydro Plan, as the Liberals have called it. So we'll be talking about hydro prices and what the drive to privatize our public hydro system is doing to people across the province, as well as in Windsor and Essex County, and what the Fair Hydro Plan actually means to the people of Ontario. I'm also going to talk about the current strike at colleges across the province, the college faculty that are currently out on strike in their second week, entering into their third week of the strike. And then I'm going to talk about healthcare and the drive by previous Liberal or previous Conservative governments and the current Liberal government to privatize our healthcare system, and what that looks like and at what cost that will come to the people of Ontario and Windsor and Essex County. Before I get into the topics, though, I do want to mention that you can follow me on social media. So what you're going to find on my social media accounts is probably going to be a little different than what you're going to hear in the podcasts. And there's a lot more information that we put up on social media than I'm able to cover in my podcast. So I encourage you to go to Twitter and follow me. It's at L Gretzky. You can find me on Facebook under Lisa Gretzky. Make sure you're going to my Facebook page, though, not to my personal Facebook, because we put up a lot of information on the Facebook page. Or you can follow me on Instagram. Also, it's Lisa Gretzky. So to begin with this week's topics, we're going to start with hydro. And as many of you know, in Windsor and Essex County, hydro rates have skyrocketed. It's been happening for years that they've been going up, but over the last year or so, hydro rates have really skyrocketed. And for those of you who count on electric heat, I'm sure you're very concerned going into the winter as the weather is changing, that your hydro bills are going to become even more unmanageable than they are now. And you're not wrong in thinking that. As you know, privatization of our public hydro system started under a Conservative government. So the government prior to the Liberals forming government were the ones that actually started to deregulate our hydro system and privatize it. Since the Liberals came into power, and I think it's important to point out that under Premier Dalton McGuinty, who formed the first Liberal government after the Conservatives were voted out of office, Premier McGuinty had actually opposed the privatization of our hydro system. So when the Conservatives started it, the Liberals opposed the privatization. And when Premier McGuinty took office, he actually said they wouldn't privatize the system. He recognized that it was a bad idea to take our hydro system out of public hands and put it into private for-profit hands. Unfortunately, that thinking has changed over the years, and we now find that the Liberal government under Kathleen Wynne, who was part of McGuinty's cabinet at the time, she was a cabinet minister, has forged ahead with selling off our public hydro system, even though over 80% of the people in this province opposed the sell-off. They opposed the privatization. We had actually asked for a referendum, and New Democrats had asked for a referendum on privatizing it. So it would go out to the people of the province, out to the people of Windsor and Essex County, to say, do you support the privatization, or do you want your hydro to stay in public hands? The Liberal government didn't support that. And so they forged ahead with the privatization, saying that it would actually lower bills for the people in Ontario. And what we've seen is the exact opposite of that. We have seen skyrocketing hydro bills. So under political pressure, and those of the opposition party, the New Democrats, and the opposition of the people of the province, the Liberal government recognized that they had really damaged their reputation as a government. And so recently they came forward with what they call the Fair Hydro Plan. But really this plan is anything but fair to the people of Ontario or the people of Windsor and Essex County. In fact, the Financial Accountability Officer. So we have independent officers of the legislature. These are independent officers who are experts in their field, and they are not a partisan group. They are not attached to any political party at all. They give an unbiased look into what is going on in the legislature, the bills that we're debating, the laws that are coming forward. They look at accounting practices. There's a wide range of what these independent officers do. And so the Financial Accountability Officer actually looked into the cost of privatizing the hydro system after the Liberals had started to forge ahead with their idea. And back in May, the Financial Accountability Officer pointed out that privatizing the system is actually costing the people of Ontario $4 billion. And that's a huge, when you think about that, not only do you have the upfront cost of getting hydro and using hydro in your homes, many people have found that even conserving energy, so cutting back as much as they possibly can, is still not helping with their bills. And it's not going to help because what they're doing is this $4 billion is going to be financed and charged back to the people of Windsor and Essex County and the province. And so you will, in the end, still pay the additional costs that you're paying now. The Liberals brought forward what they call the Fair Hydro Plan. And really what they're doing is extending that debt over time. So it's going to take the people of this province longer. They're saying they're lowering your bills. And in fact, some people are seeing a little bit of relief. And I will stress it's a little bit of relief. It's really not enough for most people to go out and buy groceries during the week. It's not enough for them to actually pay another bill with. It is a very small amount that they're saving on their hydro bills. And in order for them to provide, for the government to provide that little bit of relief, they're actually financing the cost over time, over several years. And what that means for the people of Windsor and Essex County and across the province is that $4 billion for this hydro scheme is collecting interest. So not only will you be paying on the initial cost of the privatization, but you're going to be paying for interest in order to delay paying for that debt over time. It just came out recently from the Auditor General, who is another independent officer of the legislature. She looked into this hydro plan since the Financial Accountability Officer did in May. She's looked at it again, taken a closer look at it, and has come to the realization that the Liberals have spent $2 million on advertising alone just to repair their damaged reputation. So you've probably seen the ads where they're talking about what they've done to provide relief for the people of our area and across the province, what they've done to actually lower the hydro rates. They don't acknowledge that they're the cause of those increases to begin with. They don't take responsibility for that. What they're trying to do is make it seem like they're the heroes. They're coming in and they're the ones who are actually going to save you money on their hydro. And that is not accurate. Nor is it fair to the people of Windsor and Essex County. But they've spent $2 million, public dollars, your money, in ads to talk about how wonderful they are and how they're saving you money. In those ads, they're not talking about how that money that the relief that they're providing is actually costing you more in the long run. These ads are nothing more than a political campaign strategy. So as you know, we are going to be in a provincial election. June 2018 is when the next provincial election is. So they're kicking into high gear in campaign mode, and they're coming forward with these ads. They're doing everything that they possibly can to repair their damaged reputation. And they're doing that at the expense of Windsor and Essex County taxpayers, people who pay taxes, who expect to have quality service, who expect to have quality publicly owned services like healthcare and education, people who are wanting to be able to afford to cook dinner at dinner time, people who want to afford to be able to do laundry when they need to, people who want to be able to have the lights on and help their children with their homework when they need to. Many people are having to shift when they do these things because of time of use billing. And on that particular topic, I just want to point out that the New Democrats have actually said, when we formed government in 2018, we will do away with mandatory time of use billing. So that what that means to the people of Windsor and Essex County and across the province is you will be able to do all the things that you need to do when you need to do them. You don't have to worry about time of day peak use charges as opposed to doing your laundry at 1 o'clock in the morning, which is a burden on many people in Windsor and Essex County, especially our senior citizens. The other thing that the Auditor General pointed out through her investigation, through her research, and again, this is a professional whose job it is to look at the inner workings of the legislature, to look at what legislation means to the people of this province, to report back on the financial stability of the province, and what our decisions as MPPs mean to that economic stability. So when the Auditor General started investigating, what she found is that after the Financial Accountability Officer announced that it would actually cost Ontarians $4 billion for the government's plan to reduce hydro bills, what she found is that within the Liberal Party, so within the Liberal caucus and their staffers, so that's the sitting MPPs, the cabinet ministers, and their staff, there were internal emails that went back and forth showing that if the Liberal government brought in this plan, that it would be detrimental to the people in this province. It also showed that the Liberal government, who has started this new alternative financing scheme that the Auditor General reported on, it showed that they were actually trying to hide or mask, however you want to veil it, however you want to word it. They were actually trying to conceal from the people of the province how much this plan was actually going to cost in the end. So they've actually changed the way that standard practices for accounting that are used across not just government, but across independent agencies as well and corporations. There are standards that are used and common standards that are used. And these internal emails from within the Liberal Party showed that they were purposely using alternative financing methods, alternative financing scheme, in order to hide the actual impact that their plan will have on the people of Windsor and Essex County and across the province. And when the government was confronted with that this week in the legislature, my colleague Peter Tabbins stood up in the House and asked questions about it. We've had our leader, Andrea Horvath, raise questions about it as well, asking the government why it is that they're using an alternative financing scheme to hide from the people, to conceal from the people of Windsor and Essex County and across the province, why they're trying to hide the actual impact of their scheme. And I think that's a valid question. I think that's a question the people of Windsor and Essex County should be asking those that are in government. Why is it that not only did you make a bad decision, one that the people of this province didn't support, to privatize our hydro system, why are you telling people that you are actually saving them money on their hydro bills when you're the ones who drove the cost of hydro up 300%? It is squarely on the Liberal government's decision to continue the privatization of our system that hydro bills have actually risen by 300% in this province. Why is the Liberal government using alternative financing schemes to hide the real impact of what this is going to cost the people of Windsor and Essex County? You know, the Minister of Advanced Education, who's also the Deputy Premier, stood in the House and talked about how this is similar to mortgaging a home. And I believe that the President of the Treasury Board did the same thing. Many of the Liberal members have stood up and talked about how this is like mortgaging a home. This is nothing like mortgaging a home. So I want to be clear about that. When you have a mortgage on your home, at the end of your mortgage, you owned that home. At the end of this plan by the Liberal government, after you've paid out $4 billion in interest charges, after we have paid for the $2 million in advertising to repair the Liberal government's damaged reputation, after all those costs are accounted for, we own nothing. We do not own the hydro system. That system has been privatized. And I should point out, well, we own a small portion of that system, very small portion. The large majority of the system has been privatized. And again, this is not the way that people in Windsor wanted to go with our public hydro system. And as New Democrats, we have promised that when we form government in 2018, we will put our hydro system back in public hands. We will get the cost of hydro under control. We will eliminate time of use charges, and we will permanently remove the provincial portion of the HST from your bill. It's something we opposed going on in the first place, and it's a promise that we are making and are dedicated to. We want to remove as much of the burden from the people of this province as we possibly can. So with that being said, before I move on to the next topic, and again, on the hydro plan, I encourage you to contact the Liberal MPPs and let them know how you feel about this alternative financing scheme that they're using to hide the truth, the full cost of their plan from the people of Windsor and Essex County. I want to mention, before I move on to the next topic, that next time that I record, I will have a special guest, but you're going to have to wait till the end to find out who my special guest is going to be. It's not an episode that you're going to want to miss because it's something that is important to the people of Canada. It will affect everyone in Canada, but it is a really important topic here in Windsor and Essex County, something that could very strongly adversely affect the people in Windsor and Essex County. So my next topic, I want to talk about the current strike going on at colleges across Ontario. I know that maybe some people are uncertain what has caused the strike. They're not sure why our college faculty is on strike. They're not sure why students are not getting into their classrooms and getting the education that they paid for. And I want to help clear up what exactly the issue is and how we can move this forward, how we can get faculty back in the classrooms and we can get students back in the classrooms. So first and foremost, I should point out that our colleges have the lowest public funding out of any of our public education institutions. So people think that students pay tuition and that is what pays for the upkeep of the buildings, the cost of the bills for the buildings, such as hydro, that it pays for the cost of the faculty, that it covers anything that a college would need in order to provide the best education possible to the students that choose to go to college. But tuition alone does not cover those costs. So as we're seeing tuition rising, and that is certainly something, maybe that's a discussion we can have in another podcast about why the cost of post-secondary education is continuing to rise. But while tuition is rising, it is not covering all of the costs of operating colleges. And the Liberal government, or any government, frankly, actually provides funding to our elementary and secondary schools, to our colleges, and to our public universities. And when you look at how colleges are funded, they receive the lowest funding per pupil than any other public education institution. So they get less money per pupil than our elementary schools, less money per pupil than our secondary schools, and less money per pupil than our universities. They also receive some grants to help put in programming for students that want to go to college, or they get grants for students that want to go into university. College grants are much, much lower, alarmingly lower than our universities. And I think that's important to point out, that they are the lowest publicly funded institutions in Ontario. So as a result, what is happening is colleges are kind of rolling back the direction that we should be going. What they're doing is they're bringing in more and more part-time faculty, or they're bringing in faculty that are on contracts. So they have work for 4 months, and then at the end of the 4 months, they have to reapply for their job. And what that means is often there is new faculty coming in, faculty who doesn't have an opportunity to really get to know the course material. They don't have an opportunity to develop course material. They don't have an opportunity to really get to know each individual student. and understand how that child needs to be taught. So each child is different. Each student is different. I guess I shouldn't call them children because they're technically adults going into college. But each student has their own learning style. And when you have full-time faculty who knows they have a stable job, who knows they're not going to have to reapply in 4 months, who know that they have an office, because these part-time or contract faculty don't even have an office where students can come to them when they need extra help. Often what they're doing is they're meeting in stairwells, or they're meeting in a cafeteria, or they have to text information back and forth to their students in order to try and help them succeed in whatever career path they're going in. So this is the fight that the college faculty are taking on right now. They're not just fighting for their own jobs. They're not saying, and certainly part of the argument is equal pay for equal work. And again, that will maybe be another good topic for a podcast. Those doing the same work as someone else, same work as their colleagues, should be getting equal pay. But when you're part-time or contract, you're not getting paid on the same equal pay scale as you should be. And so that's a good topic for me to cover in another podcast. But what these faculty are saying, aside from equal pay, is they're saying it's not fair to them and their families to be working part-time, to have unstable work, to have contract work where they have to reapply every 4 months for a job. It's not fair to them because they have families and they have bills that they have to pay too. But on the flip side of that, it's not fair to students. I know when my son goes into post-secondary next year, when he goes to college, I want to know that he is a teacher in the classroom who has enough other faculty teaching the same type of program where they can go and be mentored by that faculty. I want to know that my son's professor actually has the time that they can dedicate to his needs and those of the other students in the classroom. I want to know that he is getting the best quality education. And people will say, students deserve the education they pay for, and they absolutely do. And that is part of the fight that the college faculty is taking on. They know that many of the students they are teaching today could go on and be the professors of tomorrow. They could be the ones that are in the same position as their teachers are today. They want students to know that when they spend all that money on an education and they graduate, that they're going to go out into whatever their field is and have stable full-time work that they can depend on, that they know that they can pay their bills and raise their families on. So it's important for people to understand that. This is not just about the faculty fighting for themselves. They're actually taking on the fight for future generations. They're taking on the fight for the students that we are seeing in the colleges today. And it's not just within the college sector we're seeing this. The university professors face the same issues. There are many other sectors that are facing the same issues where the organizations they work for are going more to a part-time or unstable, undependable work model. And that is something that all of us need to push back against, because none of us want to be in a position where we have to worry if from one day to the next we're going to have a job, or where the money's going to come from to feed our kids or pay our bills. So I encourage you to reach out to the college faculty and to the students to show your support. Contact your Liberal government members. The Minister of Advanced Education, the Deputy Premier of this province, can resolve this issue by getting both groups back to the table. The College Council is the group made up of administrators from several different colleges who they're the ones that are supposed to be at the bargaining table with our college faculty, and they're refusing to sit and talk with them. This could have been resolved if the College Council would have come back to the table and actually talked to the faculty and tried to hammer out a deal. And they're not doing that. And the Minister of Advanced Education, the Deputy Premier of this province, has the ability to force the council back to the table and tell them to bargain. It's not good enough that the Liberal government stands up and says they respect the collective bargaining process. What they need to recognize is that you need both parties at the table in order for that to happen. And the college faculty, they're willing to bargain. They want to bargain. They don't want to be on strike. They don't want to see students potentially lose their school year. They don't want to see the cost, the tuition cost to the students be lost. That is not what this is about. And so we need the college council to get back to the table with the faculty, college faculty. We need the government to step in and tell the college council, those from the administrative side, to actually get to the table and bargain. Because until those two groups are in conversation, this isn't going to get settled, and we stand a real risk of students losing their school year. Now, I want to once again remind you that I do a lot of posting on social media, a lot of updates on social media. And so I encourage you to follow me on Twitter. My Twitter handle is @LGretzky. You can find me on Facebook under Lisa Gretzky, or I'm also on Instagram, also under Lisa Gretzky. Now I'm going to move on. In the last few minutes of the podcast, I want to talk about healthcare and the privatization, the continued privatization of our healthcare system. So I'm not just talking about hospitals. I'm talking about community services. So I'm talking about the labs that provide diagnostic imaging, those that do MRIs and dialysis, ultrasound, PET scans, endoscopy, pain management, some of the clinics that you go to have blood drawn to take tests, those that actually take samples that are sent from a doctor and do the tests on them to determine whether or not somebody has cancer or some other illness. And more, these services are being moved out of our publicly funded hospitals. And the result of that is you're finding more and more privately owned, for-profit companies that are opening up, providing these services. And just to be clear, when I'm not suggesting that hospitals provide all of those services. I understand that sometimes, healthcare needs to evolve in order to better serve the population and to address any healthcare concerns. But we need to make sure that when we're looking at community services when it comes to healthcare, those are fully accessible, publicly funded services, that they're non-profit services, that it's not a matter of whoever can afford it gets to move to the front of the line for those services. Everybody deserves equitable healthcare in Windsor and Essex County and across the province. Unfortunately, what we have currently is a Liberal government that is moving more and more towards the privatization of our healthcare system. So we don't have to look far to see, we don't have to go too far back, actually, in Windsor to see the results of that, to see the effects on that. We only have to look at the Medical Laboratory of Windsor strike that recently ended. But the workers there were out on strike. This was a publicly funded private corporation. So although the owners, the corporation, actually made money on providing the services, it was actually our money that was funding that. And the workers there were not being paid equitably. They were making less than their counterparts at other private labs. They were making almost half of what the people providing the same service in hospitals were making. And it's important to point out, because some were saying it's not apples to apples, but it is, because those providing the services in the hospitals, those are publicly funded services. That's our money going to provide those services and pay those wages. But when you move that out into the private sector, it becomes about that company, that corporation making money. And that's often at the detriment of the people that are actually providing the services, the frontline workers. And it's also to the detriment of those of us that go in and use those services. It has a negative effect on how those services are delivered. And again, it turns into a system often, and I'm not saying medical laboratories specifically, but when you have for-profit private organizations that are receiving public dollars, it often, we've seen in other areas where it turns into whoever can afford the service moves to the front of the line. It's not based on need anymore. It's based on ability to pay. And that is an unfair system. It is certainly not a system that New Democrats support. We do not support the privatization of our healthcare system. It has such a negative effect on the people in Windsor, people of Essex County, and people across the province. And the Liberal government recently introduced Bill 160, And I just want to touch on some of the key points of why we oppose Bill 160. Because on the surface, it sounds like a good thing, but it does not transform or change the way services are actually positively delivered in Windsor or across the province. It doesn't eliminate wait times in our ERs. It doesn't eliminate hallway medicine. So it doesn't change the fact that you or a loved one could go to the hospital and there is no room for them there. So they could end up in a hallway for days, or a broom closet, or in a room where a lounge where people would normally go to watch TV while their loved one is resting. It will not change that at all. And it's a move more towards what the government has now built, community health facilities, which is a misnomer. It is not actually built on community, publicly funded, nonprofit community health facilities. Community health facilities are facilities that are nonprofit, that provide equitable access to healthcare for everybody, regardless of your ability to pay. And they're not there to make a profit on the backs of the people of the province, people who are already paying for services. They're not there to make a profit off of that. They're simply there to provide quality services. So by rolling in these privately run for-profit agencies under the umbrella of community health facilities is misleading the people of Windsor and Essex County and misleading the people of this province. And that is why New Democrats stood and voted against Bill 160 in the legislature. We, again, do not support the privatization of our healthcare sector. It should be available to everyone based on need and not ability to pay. As I mentioned before I wrap up, next time I will have a special guest on. That special guest is Tracy Ramsey, the MP for Essex. She is also our federal NDP critic for international trade. So she will be on the podcast. We will talk about NAFTA negotiations, what NAFTA, the current negotiations, mean for the people across Canada, and more specifically in our region. And we will talk about topics like pharmacare, something that provincial New Democrats have promised to bring in when we form government in 2018, a truly universal pharmacare program, not like the Liberals have brought in order to win votes, where if you're 24 and under, you will have your prescription drugs covered. We are talking about universal pharmacare, where everybody, regardless of age, will have access to the medications that they need. And at the federal level, the New Democrats are pushing for that as well. And so we'll have a conversation about that. And we will also talk about the new federal NDP leader, Jagmeet Singh, who was, prior to being elected as the federal leader recently, was, I'm proud to say, my colleague in the Ontario legislature. So if you have any questions or comments regarding what I've discussed today in the podcast, I encourage you to reach out to via email to shows@wepodcast.ca. Send your emails there. Let them know if you have any questions, comments, concerns about what I talked about today. If you want information on how to reach any of the Liberal government members that I've talked about, we can get that information to you. If you have suggestions about future topics you'd like to hear about, let me know as well, and we will try and get those into another podcast. So for now, I want to thank you for tuning in, and I look forward to bringing you the third episode of Unparliamentary with Lisa Gretzky.